You're going to do the intro, right?
Yeah, I hit start broadcast, but it's not starting. I don't know if the attendees can hear me. If the attendees can hear me, can someone type in the chat that they can hear me?
I still have a start broadcast on my screen.
Why don't
The
you?
broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to eGestalt's webinar titled HIPAA High-Tech Compliance, How to be Ready for an OCR Audit. Today's presenter is Anupam Sahai, co-founder and president eGestalt. Anupam is an accomplished management, marketing, and technology leader with 21 plus years of experience directing teams to develop and launch globally renowned products generating up to $350 million annually. Prior to eGestalt, Anupam was Vice President Marketing for Ixia Inc. He is a recognized expert in the areas of cloud computing, security, networking, and is a featured speaker at several industry conferences worldwide. If you have any questions, please send them via the questions function in GoToWebinar, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. If you'd like a copy of the presentation, please send an email directly to Anupam. His contact information will be given at the end. Thank you, Anupam, for presenting, and I'll turn the webinar over to you now.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. So the topics that I will cover today is, firstly, I'll start off with HIPAA high-tech requirements for medical providers and their business associates. What are the best practices and caveats that we need to be careful about as we go about implementing the HIPAA high-tech requirements. And I'll also talk about specifically how to be ready for an OCR audit. We get this question from a number of our end customers and partners today. And this is a topic that's very, very current and very hot, if I might say, because of all the HHS and OCR audits that are happening this year. I will also talk about some automated tools and specifically talk about Secure GRC, which is a cloud-based software as a service solution for security monitoring and compliance management, and finally concluding remarks. Before we start the webinar, I want to mention that while we have made every effort to ensure that the information is current, but this information is subject to change. It's constantly evolving, and there are some subjective interpretations to HIPAA high-tech rules that could change. So please consult your legal counsel for definitive information. Before I jump into the best practices and caveats, I want to set some basic acronyms and terminologies that everybody is aware of, and then go about the discussion. So HIPAA, high-tech, are the words that you'll hear from me a lot. HIPAA is the Insurance Portability Act that was enacted by US Congress in 1996. High-tech, which is really a game changer, is really enforcement of the HIPAA Act. It stands for Healthcare Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act. And in high-tech, there are a number of new provisions that really lead to higher enforcement of HIPAA, and also it provides about $28 billion incentive, federal incentive, to implement EHR, electronic health records, and I'll talk about some of that. From the acronym perspective, HHS stands for Health and Human Services. OCR stands for Office of Civil Rights, which is the enforcement agency. PHI and EPHI are variants of protected health information. If it's an electronic form, then it's called EPHI. And CE is covered entity, which is a medical provider. A business associate, BA, is anybody who deals with a covered entity or medical records, electronic protected health information, or simply protected health information in physical form or electronic form, is a BA. So before let me talk a little bit about what is HITECH and what is HIPAA. And one of the key tenets of HIPAA HITECH is really about increasing the quality of care and also decreasing the cost of administering the healthcare. And this is really brought about by providing portable medical records which can be shared across various providers, patients, and families, and also shared between different providers such as medical providers and labs and other business associates. And as medical information becomes portable, there is a huge need to ensure that privacy and security of that PHI, personal health information, is ensured. So HIPAA HITECH is about ensuring better processes and use of technology to protect PHI information and thereby making the healthcare information portable and decrease the cost of administering the healthcare requirements. A covered entity could be either a healthcare provider or a health plan or a healthcare clearinghouse. So anybody who interacts with end customers, stores the information, or transmits it to any other business associate can be deemed a healthcare provider, and it includes doctors, clinics, and different kind of medical providers that you see here. A business associate is anybody who accesses the protected health information either by working with a medical provider. They are required now as part of HITECH Act, which was in 2009, to be bound by the same set of regulations as a medical provider is. And so HITECH has expanded the scope of protecting and ensuring privacy and security of PHI data, not just for the medical providers, but also for their business associates. And so the list of business associates is really pretty large. As you can see here, anybody who deals with PHI, either it could be an IT service provider, it could be an accountant, you could be a lawyer, you could be an EMR implementation provider, you could be a MSP, you could even be a garbage collector where you're disposing of garbage which might have PHI information being disposed of. All of these organizations, businesses are quote-unquote BAs. Some of the game changers from the HITECH Act perspective is the fines have gone up, which means that earlier the fines were $100 for violating. It's now gone up to $50,000, and it can be as high up to $1.5 million per year. There are new criminal liabilities, so you cannot feign ignorance that I didn't know about the law, hence I'm not liable. And that has been taken out of it. So by law, everybody is required to be HIPAA HITECH compliant. All covered entities and business associates are. And HHS has started enforcement of HIPAA HITECH requirements this year. And not only that, not only OCR, but also state attorney generals have the authority to bring actions, civil actions on behalf of their citizens. So it's not just the federal government, but also the state governments who are in the process of enforcement as we speak today. I talked about business associates and subcontractors are contractually obligated to be HIPAA HITECH compliant, and there are specific data breach notification requirements in case for whatever reason you do get breached. There are requirements with respect to reporting it to HHS within a certain period of time, whether you're a covered entity or a business associate. If you're a business associate, you need to report the breach to the covered entity and the HHS. If you're a covered entity, you just need to report it to HHS. So the bottom line is that enforcement is happening now. The fines have been upped, the new criminal prosecution abilities, and so there's a lot of action here. as we speak. From the technology adoption point of view, really electronic medical records is driving a lot of the enforcement or the upgrade of the healthcare IT infrastructure. And the federal government has put aside $28 billion in federal grant to ensure that every covered entity who's implementing medical records gets an incentive from the government. The incentive can be $44,000 for a smaller doctor's office, up to $2 million and more for hospitals. So that's the carrot from the government, where they have put aside federal stimulus money for implementing EMR records. But and there are millions of businesses who are affected by this. There are about 700,000 healthcare providers and about a couple of million BAs that need to be HIPAA HITECH compliant. And as electronic medical records become available over the internet, they are more prone to be compromised. They need to be secured. And so one of the requirements as part of implementing electronic medical records is the need to protect the electronic information, health information that's available on the internet through electronic medical records. And that is achieved by doing a security risk analysis, which is one of the bottom line requirements by the government to get the federal grant. And that's in parts and parcel of the incentive that the government has put together. They put together a set of requirements to be met before electronic medical records is implemented and maintained. And before anybody gets a federal grant, they need to meet 15 criteria. And doing the security risk analysis is one of the key criteria, which takes about 70% of the time. So it's very important to get the risk analysis done if you want to ensure that electronic medical records are secure and it cannot be breached. Let me spend a few minutes talking about PHI because I get asked this question a lot. So PHI includes any kind of patient health information. It could be concerning the person's name. It could be about medical history. It could include name, address, birth date, etc. It could be in physical form or in electronic form. All of that is in the purview of PHI that needs to be protected and needs to be ensured. We need to ensure privacy and security of the PHI information as part of HIPAA HITECH requirement. So the HIPAA HITECH privacy and security rule really comes down to a following set of guidelines that is part of HIPAA HITECH. There are a set of technology services around protecting PHI, which includes who accesses the information, who uses the information, and how is the information shared across the internet, across different providers, maybe between a lab that's doing the medical information processing, data processing, and the medical doctor's office. And there are some administrative and physical procedures that the business, the medical provider needs to implement, or the business associate needs to implement, which could include training of employees, including policies and procedures and awareness procedures that need to be put in place to ensure protection of the PHI in terms of privacy and security information. So what can we do to become ready for an OCR audit? And I'll lay down 7 steps here, and then I'll elaborate on implementing some of this. So first thing is that we need to understand what does it mean to be HIPAA HITECH compliant. And I've talked about some of that. That's really the highlight of, at a very high level, of what HIPAA HITECH entails. But we need to understand that first. Second thing is to implement a plan that allows a proper security and compliance procedures and implementation best practices to be adopted by the business. And the first step there is really to start off with understanding where does the business stand today. So that process is called self-assessment, where you're trying to measure, relatively speaking, measure the business conditions vis-a-vis the requirements from the HIPAA HITECH perspective. And the result is a gap analysis which tells the business administrator or the compliance officer in the business to exactly what the gaps are and what the risk levels associated with those gaps are. And as a result of that gap or set of gaps that come out, there is a set of remediation procedures that need to happen to plug those gaps. And those safeguards need to be implemented, and this process needs to be repeated. Security and risk analysis and compliance is not a process, a point in time. It's an ongoing process. So it needs to be implemented and measured. An assessment needs to be done either once a year or at least once a quarter, depending on what regulation you are worried about. In HIPAA, you're required to do once a year. In PCI, it's once a quarter. PCI is a regulation from the credit card industry. And very critical is to understand the implications of the administrative and training procedures required within the business in terms of training, in terms of policies and procedures required to implement HIPAA HITECH and make it organization culture, as it were. So let's dive into some of the requirements a little bit more, and hopefully that will allow you to understand the requirements from the HIPAA HITECH perspective with respect to privacy, security, and procedural requirements. So from the security perspective, I mentioned PHI. Protecting PHI is key, and PHI can be in physical form, it can be in electronic form. In electronic form, it could be sitting on PCs, servers, maybe in backup media, or it could be, you could be accessing electronic medical records from the road through a mobile device or through laptops, VPNing in. Any access or use of electronic medical records of patient health information, that needs to be secure, whether it is at rest or in transit. From the privacy perspective, the new HITECH rules require that the individual whose patient record or the medical record is being secured here, they need to have access to the information, and they need to have complete information about who else is accessing this information and how is it being shared. So bringing the customer, bringing the patient into the whole process of how the information is being used is critical. So given these requirements, what are the steps that the covered entities and business associates need to take to implement the HIPAA HITECH requirements? That's the question that we are after. And really what I'm going to talk about in the next few slides are best practices that we have discovered from talking to a number of end customers and auditors, which we believe should get you there pretty much in terms of ensuring that you are ready to go. So from the privacy perspective, one key requirement implementation implication is that the PHI information sharing needs to be documented. And what I mean by documented is there needs to be an audit trail, there needs to be a paper trail where the patient is explicitly allowing sharing of information to people that need to know. And it's also important to segment the information, patient health information, segment it so that only the people who need to see certain parts are able to see it. And this can be enforced through a paper trail, this could be enforced through administrative procedures, and technology can help a lot. So using technology to do multi-factor authentication, which is really a way of saying that only the people who need to see the information get authenticated to use the information, and the system provides a check to ensure that the right person is accessing it. From the security and breach prevention perspective, there are a few steps that I'm going to be talking about. The first step is really put together a security and compliance plan. Start with a self-assessment, which does a gap analysis and a risk analysis on a regular basis. We recommend doing it at least once every 6 months, if not a quarter. Compliance is really about a process. It's not a point of time activity. It's a journey. And compliance is really about using security best practices to not only securing the patient information, patient medical records, PHI, but it's also about securing your business infrastructure. You know, as a medical doctor, you might have spent lots of time getting through medical school and getting educated to start a practice that's healthy, and you want to make sure that some cyber hacker out there, a rogue hacker, is not able to compromise your practice or lose data so that it exposes you to some of these privacy breach lawsuits and fines. So it's about putting together a security and compliance plan that protects the patient medical information but also protects your business infrastructure. And assign owners in the business to ensure that they are assigned roles and responsibilities for keeping up with the security and compliance practices that are determined by doing a gap analysis and risk analysis. And also this information of security risk analysis results are needed for getting the EMR meaningful use federal grant. And you need to show EMR meaningful use to get the federal grant, which requires you to do a security risk analysis anyway. So all of this is a bottom line requirement. Then all the data, PHI data, needs to be encrypted, whether it's sitting on the servers, whether you're accessing it remotely. All communication and storage of PHI information needs to be encrypted, so that even if somebody is able to intercept the data or break into a laptop, or if you lose a laptop, they cannot access the information without really knowing the security key, which is personalized. So securing the information through encryption is critical. Now, the other thing that I talked about with HITECH is that as part of HITECH, not only the medical providers are required to be compliant, required to be secured from a HIPAA HITECH perspective, the medical providers have a shared responsibility to ensure that any business associate that they work with, that they share the data, patient PHI data with, they also need to be compliant. So not only covered entities need to ensure that they are secure and compliant, they need to put together a vendor management plan in place to ensure that all their vendors, all their business associates are compliant. And they can do that through putting together business associate agreements with them, and also putting some requirements in place about, if need be, doing an audit of their business associate infrastructure to ensure that the PHI information is secure. And we have a number of hospitals who do that, where they put in requirements for their business associates to be compliant. Using cloud and software as a service-based services actually has shown through research to minimize the risk of misuse. And you know, as a small business, number of our small businesses may not have the wherewithal in terms of IT resources and security resources to protect the data. By putting it in the cloud, it actually allows you to leverage the cloud providers' best practices, and a number of cloud providers have put in and taken a lot of security measures to ensure protection and privacy of data is not compromised. And also, archival in the cloud is always a good idea to keep a backup of all the information that might be sitting in the premises. Using authentication technologies to ensure that the right person is able to access information, and typically a two-factor authentication, which means that besides a username password, you want to use an ID card or some kind of a secret shared password, biometric data, for example, or a face print, whatever it is, use more than one means of authentication of the end user so that you want to be sure that the right person is accessing the data. This is happening more and more. Social media policy, a lot of breaches that were reported of late happened because some of the employees or in the business associate employees did not know that they could not share the PHI information externally. And one of the major breaches that you folks might be aware of what happened because the patient health information was used for a class project unknowingly by one of the employees of a business associate, and that has resulted in a $100 million lawsuit for a hospital, well-known hospital. And so social media guidelines, educating employees about do's and don'ts with respect to PHI information, and putting together a responsibility and maybe some kind of a penalty for employees who violate this so that it becomes part of the corporate culture. Just as you don't talk about your intellectual property outside the company, this becomes part of your responsibility towards your patients. Disposing of patient health records, whether in electronic form or in physical form, is very critical. And there are guidelines about how the information needs to be disposed of, how the information needs to be trashed. And so a garbage collector or an electronic garbage disposal agency is a business associate, and they need to be answerable to you in terms of how they go about disposing of the PHI information. If you're storing any local information, backup copies of PHI information, then that also needs to be dealt in a careful manner. And preventing accidental misuse by either a disgruntled employee or maybe an employee who's not aware of maybe an accidental disclosure that might be happening is very important. So again, technology comes to the rescue. There are technologies available. Certainly encryption would help, but other technologies like data leak protection can be used to, again, authorize certain people who need to have access to the information. Others should not be allowed unless they are trained or they're aware of how to use the information. So those are the 9 steps that I have put together, which are really the bottom line requirements for a particular business, whether you're a covered entity or a business associate. And in the next section, I'll talk about an automated way of doing all of these HIPAA HITECH requirements and using a tool to automate the whole process so that you have a complete visibility into your current state of affairs. You can use the automated tool to do gap analysis, risk analysis, and also generate a report that you can submit for meaningful use demonstration to get the federal grant dollars. Now, I just want to tell you that some of these breaches are not that rare. They're happening pretty much by the week. Every week, there are breach reports hitting the media, and this is just in the last month or so that these breaches happened. As you can see here, reports tell us that in the first year of HITECH, 6 million records were compromised, and cyber hackers are actually targeting small and medium businesses because they do not have sophisticated IT resources. So pretty much the privacy and security breaches are happening across the board. Everybody needs to be careful. And this is report in 1 month there were about 400 breaches that happened, which involved 19 million patients. This is March 2012 data, and this chart is showing you the monthly reports that are being lodged with OCR. In January, there were 850 reports of breaches, whether it's privacy breach or security breaches that were lodged with OCR. So this is growing by the day. 50,000 reports have been launched with OCR, and OCR is clearly backed up, and 15,000 have been reviewed. 20% have been finalized for taking action against covered entities or medical or business associates. So this is a huge issue right now as we see it, and as our customers are seeing it. And this is not something that is down the road. This is happening today, and there is a huge need for a solution to address all these problems. What I'm showing you is what is called the HHS wall of shame, where any breach reported to HHS is put up on our website, and this URL actually has a very interesting set of people. It includes all size businesses, hospitals, medical offices, and by law you're required to report to HHS any breach that affects more than 500 individuals. And if you go to this site, you'll see every week there's something or the other being reported. So the question that we are trying to answer also is that how do we get around to meeting all those requirements? And today, really the solutions that are available are expensive, and it's very manual intensive. They need auditors. So that's why we built this tool called Secure GRC. It's a cloud-based solution. It's a subscription model that has built-in support for HIPAA HITECH compliance and security monitoring, and it really has a soup to nuts solution with built-in best practices, policies, and procedures that allows anybody who's not a domain expert to become compliant, become secure. So the tool will walk you through, do a gap analysis automatically, and ask you a number of questions which are yes or no answer based, and it'll give you a clear snapshot of what the current status is, and then walk you through a set of steps to plug those gaps. And we are at least 10 to 20x cheaper than either if you hire an auditor or if you buy any other tool in the market. And we sell through the channel, and we have a complete end-to-end security and compliance solution for HIPAA HITECH. We can create a meaningful use report, which includes a security risk analysis element to it, which most of the providers do not. In fact, and so we can provide one report for meaningful use demonstration, which you can submit to the government to get your federal dollars. And mind you, security risk analysis takes about 70% of the time. That one requirement to get the federal grant, which is not possible today otherwise, takes 70% of the time. And we have a number of channel partners that we work with, EMR vendors, resellers, distributors that allow you to access the service. We offer the service solution in multiple versions. There's the enterprise version, there's a small business version, vendor and BA management for managing your external vendors. All of that, all those versions are available in the tool, and it's simple to use. I'll give you some snapshots on how the tool manages it. And of course, these are starting prices. Depending on your requirement, we can come up with a pricing that might be workable. So the tool scales up from small doctor office practices to large hospitals. We have end customers in either end of the spectrum, and they of course use different versions of the tool. To walk you through the tool and give you a flavor of what it looks like, this is a snapshot of the workflow. So you start out with answering a number of questions, and each question has been, the regulation has been demystified to make into a yes or no question, and you pick one or the other depending on the question asked. And on the right hand side you'll see that there's a lot of information available to interpret some of these questions if it's not obvious to you. And you can also upload evidence that can support your answer. You have right in the tool a set of policy documents that can be customized to adopt it for your business or to train people internally. This is talking about the breach notification policy requirements and what you need to do to implement this. There's also guidance on the citation so that you can understand what does this question mean. It tells you that you need to notify 10 or more people and ensure that you report this to HHS. And also the best practices are right in the tool. It's available right in the tool for you to look at so that you know that if you're not compliant today, how do you go about implementing and plugging the gap. And then we also have a built-in risk model in the tool, which is based on 5 variables, which is pre-populated and pre-configured by default, so that as you answer the questions, you have a complete snapshot of where does the business stand with respect to exposure, with respect to risk exposure, with respect to the current status. And based on that, you'll get a heat graph, which red means bad, green means good. And as you answer the questions, you can see this heat bar pointer go to the left, hopefully, if you've done the right things to implement HIPAA HITECH compliance and secure practice. But at any point in time, you can click on the dashboard, get a snapshot view of where you stand with respect to any unanswered questions. And we also have something called harmonization, which means you don't need to answer the same question twice. The system is intelligent enough to understand the answer for one. If it's applicable to any other question, it knows how to take that and implement it and harmonize it. We also have an automated way of managing your vendors that basically starts out with sending out a small questionnaire to your vendors who then respond back again through the tool with their answers, and you get a snapshot view of their compliance level. So they would typically get a short questionnaire with 20 questions, which are fundamental requirements for HIPAA HITECH to secure the PHI. And you can send it out to some of our customers. For example, send out the short questionnaire to literally 200 plus of their business associates. And once it's sent out, you can monitor who has answered the question and what the status of the assessment is. At any point in time, you can generate what is called a report on compliance, which gives you a complete snapshot view of your compliance status or of your business associates. That allows you to know where you stand, what's your current status with respect to the compliance level issues. If you have a number of business associates that you are working with, you can also get a snapshot view of their status. For example, I'm working with, I'm a medical doctor and I have these business associates. I know what their compliance level is, what their risk rating is, and then I can also know which of these business associates are more at risk than the other so that I can pursue them. And number of our covered entities follow up this vendor management program or assessment, initial assessment with a letter that is sent out to them saying, hey folks, we need you to work with us to get to be HIPAA HITECH compliant. This is required by law. So all of this is built into the tool and allows our end customers to completely automate their security and compliance management process. So with respect to how to be prepared for an OCR audit, let me summarize. Firstly, you need to assess your security and compliance status by doing a self-assessment, doing a gap analysis, and a risk analysis. And once you know what the gaps are, what the high-risk items are, you need to put together a plan to plug those gaps and to not only plug it once, but to maintain compliance and security through an automated tool like Secure GRC. You need to secure the data, PHI data, and not just secure it internally within the business, but also secure it as you work with other external vendors, business associates. And as part of HIPAA HITECH, there is a need to build a data breach response plan for whatever reason, unknown reason. If you do get breached, you are legally responsible and liable to let HHS know if your breach involves more than 500 patient records. And there needs to be organizational responsibilities to ensure security and compliance is taken care of, maybe with the help of an automation tool, and that's very critical. So in closing, I would say Secure GRC, SB, or Enterprise could be the tool that could help you manage your end-to-end compliance and security issues. It helps you not only become compliant, but also get the meaningful use dollars by submitting the complete meaningful use report through the tool to federal government to get the federal grant. And you can also implement a formal vendor management program through the tool. And if your IT service provider does not have Secure GRC or Secure GRC SB or Enterprise, do let us know. We'll make sure that they're aware of this tool, or you can call us to find a channel partner in your area who can help you get there or get more information. With that, by the way, the references are here. I'll post this also on the website so that you have it. With that, I'll open it up for questions. Mike?
Great. Thanks, Anupam, for presenting. There is Anupam's email address and phone number. I got some questions about how they can receive the presentation. Go ahead and email Anupam. And
Sure.
We're also recording the webinar, so it'll be available up on eGestalt's website at www.egestalt.com. Feel free to ask your questions via the questions area of GoToWebinar, and we'll get them answered. Anupam, our first question, how can anyone be sure that medical records are secure when hosted in the cloud by a third party?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the only way we can be secure is to understand what kind of security best practices are being adopted by the cloud provider. So if this cloud provider has taken precautions, like there are a number of standards such as SAS 70, ask them questions about what kind of security mechanisms are they employing to provide authentication and access control. So they need to answer a number of questions around security and privacy controls that they have put in place to ensure security of data. And most of the cloud providers already do that, because they are much more hyper about security, being asked this question more than once. And for example, Secure GRC, we've pretty much implemented the best practices and beyond. We secured the data, we have multiple authentication mechanisms, we also have SAS 70 certification for the data center that hosts our software. So ask these questions, and that's the best way to move forward.
Okay, thanks, Anupam. You mentioned incentives for physicians. Are there any for BAs?
Hello, Mike. You're not able to hear you.
Oh, did you get my question?
Repeat the question, please.
Can you hear me?
No, you broke up. Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. You mentioned incentives for physicians. Are there any for BAs?
It's for people who implement electronic medical records.
Okay.
So I think it's covered entities.
And do you integrate with ECW?
what does ECW stand for?
I'll get some clarification on that, Anupam.
Sure.
The
Sure.
attendee that
Please
asked
reach
that.
out to me. Yeah, please reach out to me separately.
Okay.
I suspect it's a medical EMR, electronic medical record provider. We have integration in place with a number of electronic medical records that we are targeting to have a joint solution with, so we can take it offline and talk about it.
Okay. And can you speak more about DLP?
Yeah, so data leak protection, DLP stands for data leak protection, is one of the technologies used for ensuring or preventing accidental misuse of data. So what it means is, let's say you're using a laptop and you copy patient records off the laptop using a USB stick. So a DLP solution could help you there. But the high-level objective is really to protect patient health information from being accessed or copied or transmitted. If you're not authorized to do that, then it should prevent you from doing it. And DLP is one of the technologies that allows you to manage that. There's encryption, and there are multiple avenues that you could use for achieving the same effect. So our solution, our tool, provides you with guidance with respect to all these different options and which ones you can adopt based on your situation. It's not one size fits all.
Great. Thanks, Anupam. Here's our last question. Do you know if OCR has contacted all entities that would be audited in 2012?
I believe they are doing that. They are selecting some hundreds of entities and sending out letters to them in a randomized fashion based on the media reports. And I believe that's certainly happening in 2012. They have hired an agency, KPMG, as you know, to do these audits, and they have a seed fund, but really the audit process will be funded by the fines that the agency recovers from the enforcement. So it's kind of a snowballing, self-funded approach is what I understand.
Okay.
So while it might start out with a small number of recruits, it'll certainly be affecting a larger number down the road for sure.
Now, does a subscription to Secure GRC include telephone support?
That's correct.
Okay.
It includes telephone support, and we have multiple options. If you need a lot more domain expertise, we can provide that, etc. So if you're interested, please reach out and we can help you there.
Great. Thanks, Anupam, and thank you to the attendees for attending today's webinar. As I mentioned, we're going to be putting it up, the recording of the webinar, up on eGestalt's website at www.egestalt.com. And if you'd like to reach out to Anupam, his contact information is on the screen. Feel free to do so. And thank you, Anupam, for presenting today. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Have a good day.